about the ending and like what's happening with the world.
Hi, hello everyone. Hi, thank you so much for coming. I'm Miriam. I'm one of the talent execs at Short Circuit. I'm delighted to introduce you to Ruth Paxton, the director of A Banquet and many other short films we're to discuss, and also her director of photography, David Liddell. So we'll kick off by watching the trailer for A Banquet.
Mum, I'm going now.
Love you.
I love you back.
How are things?
Keeping busy. It's been a difficult year. And the pressure these girls are getting from all sides. You can be anything. You're my special girl, Bets.
There's this story about a beautiful young woman. She's perfect in every way, except for one thing. She never eats. This begins to gnaw at the mother.
My body sometimes just shuts off. I get nauseous around foods.
You're unwell. We'll figure this out, okay?
I can feel something inside of me. I've been chosen.
You're a very good mother.
Do not infect this family with your ideas.
But this is getting seriously out of control.
Are you suggesting Betsy's been possessed by a demon?
Quite the opposite. I believe Betsy's possessed this family. You, most of all.
It's not a game, Betsy! Mom! Please!
I just want it all to be over.
So thank you again both for being here. So if we can start by going right back to the start and talking about your route into the industry, and also maybe a little bit about how you two ended up working together originally.
Mm-hmm. Well, I go first.
You go first.
I'll go first. Well, I studied film at art school in Edinburgh, which was a slightly different route in from doing, I guess, you know, I want to say RSAMD, and I know that's not what it's called now, but, you know, that kind of more
RCS.
technical, RCS. And I went to art school kind of knowing I wanted to do film, but I did the first year because I went going from Edinburgh, and I thought I should embrace it because I wasn't like I was coming from another city. But I ended up just doing lots of kind of stuff that I really didn't enjoy, like sculpture and, you know, things that weren't me. So I enjoyed doing film there. I always say that it taught me a way of thinking. It wasn't so much about the practical side of things. We did make movies with each other, of course, but I wasn't a technical student, let's say. And you know, if I was working on other students' films, it was in a capacity as a designer, or like as a production designer, or with costume. And then I think, you know, coming out from there, it was sort of following the route through what Creative Scotland was offering at the time, really, and sort of going into it was Digital at the time. That was the programme I went through when I made my first funded short film, and that was the first film that we worked together on.
Yes, and we met at the Edinburgh Film Festival that year when you were trying to put the crew together, and I got sent your film from college, She Wanted to Be Burnt, which I just fell in love with. It was so beautiful and visceral and honest, and just had this cool design to it. And yeah, just so interesting and powerful, and I loved that. And then we had a really nice meeting about the short film, and
you had everything labelled and highlighted, and that was like, well, I know that's my man. We were both Virgos and we're both very neat.
Yeah, and we had the same pens.
Yep.
Which was,
was a big
really
deal.
Good sign. Stationery is very important to us. So yeah, and then yeah, I think it was sort of. I think you interviewed a few people, didn't you, for that? And then
they were at the time. They were the powers that be were wanting. I think because it was my first short film with a budget. I think they were keen for me to work with an established DOP. So there was, you find that there's a lot of things that executives have to sign off on before you're allowed to make your choice. And that's the same with casting these films as well. And with that, I was, I hadn't been introduced to Dave's work because we were looking at, I guess, just people who'd been around longer.
I was not established. I was green. I was still at film school at the time as well. But it was, it was through mutual friends that we had that meeting in the first place. But luckily, the person they did push for couldn't do it in the end. So I got.
I don't tell it that way. Just say we fell in love and that was it.
So I got a call the week before, and then we hammered out a shot list in a day, and I think it's a testament to everything how quickly we just made that work, and it was really, really easy. Yeah. Making that first film. Yeah.
So talking about those early shorts, and obviously the first one was sort of like a baptism of fire, but moving forward with those, how were you approaching them? How were you finding your very distinctive, painterly style, I guess, is really very distinctive?
Well, I mean, we made Paris Sexy, which was 2010, and that was the first time I had money to make a film. And then after that, we made a lot of films for nothing, really, didn't we? We just kind of would embark on projects of our own that were done for either no budget or a very low budget. They might be commissions for small arts organisations and a lot of music-led stuff. So it's really just through, doing that work together and just building, a sort of shared image bank. We really know what each other's taste is, and I think that's key for, when you're looking to collaborate with not just a cinematographer, but all your heads of department, is just working out if your taste is the same, or at least, the taste for that particular film. So we're at a point now where we don't have to have a lot of conversations about framing because we just know what each other likes and that kind of thing. But it is really just through doing. And we did a lot of movies, in Dave's back garden, in my back garden, at free locations.
Yeah, after the funded short,
yeah,
we just knew that actually, I guess we were quite sad after that finished, because a short film's only 5 days or 6 days, 7 days, depends. And then the trouble with it is, it's actually, I think it's sometimes more difficult because you get all these people together for 1 week, and suddenly by day 4 or 5 you're all in a sort of groove and you're all feeling like a family, and then you wrap. So in that sense, if we're talking about shorts to features is slightly easier because you have more time to find that groove, and you have more time to go back to things and fix them and get more out of them if you've got that longer journey with the same group of people. But because of that I guess that come down after that, we did lots of weird and wonderful things because we just fell in love and loved working together. So that's a big part of it. Is I think always go with your instincts on people you're going to try and work with and make relationships with, because all the people I work with now are people that have been my friends for at least 7 or 8 years now, and it's the first 6 years of my career was a lot tougher because I was just trying to build those relationships, and now it's just really easy. It's just getting phone calls from friends and saying, "You up for having some fun?" So that's it's much easier that way, and you know where you stand because you know what that person's like. You know that you get along. You know that you trust each other. So I think making friends is probably most important thing you can do as a filmmaker.
Especially if you've not got any money.
Yeah, totally. And also I think like the hunger that you guys are describing of not waiting for necessarily like the funded shorts, but just putting together what you can and making it work on whatever budget you can muster, I think is like amazing inspirational advice, which is really hard, but you have to like beg, borrow and steal until you can make the step up to feature. So could you talk a little bit about making that leap?
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange one, because obviously after making the body of short work that I had written, I then started developing features, and that's a much longer process in itself anyway. And you're doing these development sort of setups with one, usually, if you're being funded, with one of the soft funding bodies like Creative Scotland, like BFI, Film 4, and BBC. And so I went through quite a long period of being in development with features, and I was, you know, I suppose there was a film that I was writing at one point that felt like it would be a first feature, and that was what the noise around it was. But when it came to the crunch, it was a feature that was set between Scotland and America, and it would have been what would be considered quite a large budgeted short film for a first feature, so therefore a risk, and also potentially too big for me to handle. And so that kind of fell by the wayside, and I was continuing to develop other feature films. So I had, in a way, there's no actual path, there's no, you know, route to follow, because if there was, we would do that. But there's maybe a shorter gap between shorts and features than I had. And when it came to a point where I was looking to make a different first feature, by that time, Paris Sexy, which was my first narrative short, was considered quite old, and they kind of wanted to see, well, what would you do now if you did a narrative short? So then we made Be Still, which was supposed to be a kind of proof of concept before a feature. But then A Banquet's bizarre, because it just came in left field, and it's got nothing to do with anything I was developing, and I didn't write it either. So I don't know if my route is a typical one, but what I would say is that I was totally ready to make a feature. Like, I was really hungry for it. Before Be Still, I was like, I'm not making any more short films. And then, okay, fine, we'll make one more.
Well, you'd made a few features in your head anyway, and the thing is, Ruth always shared, which I love, is Ruth's happy to share the script she's working on with me and asks for feedback, and in a lot of those cases, we just treat them like projects we were making, and talked about what we would do and stuff. So that even when you're not actually making it, you've made more work together. Just nobody's seen it. It's just all on the page, or it's all in notes, and it's all in discussions, you know.
So we'll be jumping around your timeline a little bit, but I can't help but think of the Michael Winterbottom book, Dark Matter. I don't know whether you've read it, but it's like very much saying how the UK really overdevelops films. And I think like for a lot of first-time directors, they're really suffering from that because you're so ready to make a feature. So do you want to talk a little bit about how A Banquet came to you, like at the origin of the script, and like how you ended up working on it?
Sure. Well, when you have representation, like so when you have an agent, you are often invited or sent to these general meetings. And at first, when I first started doing that, when I first signed with an agent, I was like, why am I going there? Like, to have a meeting. I'm like, what about though? I don't know why I'm going. And it took me a long time to realise you just go and talk about like what your taste is, what you're working on, and you find out maybe what that company's doing. But I had one of these general meetings with a producer called Leonora Darby, who worked for Tea Shop Productions. And it was just to check out what I was working on and, you know, what they had on their slate. And she talked to me about A Banquet, because obviously me talking about the themes I was interested in put her in mind of this script. And she described it as a film that was somewhere between Hereditary, Take Shelter, and Rosemary's Baby, and I was, you know, really eager to read it. And I did. I read it immediately, and I loved it. So it came together very quickly after a meeting with Justin, the writer, who's an American screenwriter based in America. And the script itself was based in Boston, Massachusetts, before we translated it to the UK. But it was extraordinarily fast. Like, it was the end of 2019 I read the script. And then we knew we were going to make it as a team by the very end of the year. And then when things picked up again in January, I came down for meetings we put together a pitch package. So like I wrote my statement, I guess my vision for it and imagery. We got financing the same day.
Wow.
It was crazy. It was like bizarre, and not masses of money, I might add, but we did get financing. And then we had meetings with sales agents, and Hanway took it on, and all of that was like really fresh to me. That's not the way it works with short films. This is just totally different. So yeah, and then we would have been shooting in May had it not been for that COVID. But I'm really glad that. Well, I'm not glad for COVID, obviously, but I'm really glad that we got the summer to do all that extra prep, which Dave and I really maximised on. But certainly, yeah, to go from that to having shot within a year and then really having it cut by the end of the year, it's like, I've done shorts that have taken almost as long, you know, so it's pretty bizarre.
When those opportunities come along, you just have to totally jump on them. And so at what point did David come in on that creative process?
Dave doesn't have a choice. So if I'm doing something, Dave has to do it, basically. So Dave came in the minute I got the script. I'd have sent you the script and said, this might be happening, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so once you're like, could you talk a little bit, maybe a bit more about how day-to-day you guys worked in pre-production together, how you started putting together those like amazing, like very bizarre shots of food, like where the sort of painterly like references came from, and then if we could also talk about maybe working a bit more with Justin and also how you worked with the cast as well.
Well, yeah, so we were all in lockdown, so we would do all day every Friday for about 2 months. It was just me and Ruth's day to sort of sit on Zoom and go through references and talk about the script and break down all the scenes. So we have huge amounts of images collected on our computers from painting, photography, other films, sculpture, art, dance, whatever it is, as a reference. We talk about that, and in between that, you know, the themes of the film are, I guess, intrinsically linked to the sort of the deep conversations we like to have. We've always enjoyed having very deep conversations about, the psychology and mental health and how to get by in the world with all the difficulties it has, and then that. I don't know, it just kind of goes, this is part and parcel, isn't it? The personal and the filmmaking is sort of kind of just interlinked in that way, and they feed into each other. So something that inspires you in art feeds into your thought process as a person, and something as your thought process you put into your art, and that's just kind of the mix that goes on, really, from that point, from a sort of very vague point of view. But you know, I guess the food stuff was always important to you, that it had that look and it had lots of references for how to do that. And then I kind of chose the boroscope, periscope lenses as an optical choice to try and get us as close physically to the food as possible. I mean, what's cool about boroscope and periscope lenses is that they can turn small, tiny objects into, you know, the feeling of landscapes, really, because the lens is like, just like a boroscope or a periscope, so it sits out like that. So even on a tripod, if you tilt it up or you tilt it down, it feels like it's an actual crane shot, but in a macro universe. So that was quite cool to get that feeling of something quite intense in a domestic environment. And then the painterly stuff is just always a reference we've had, so that just feeds into the art direction, like what texture and tone the walls are, and then how to light that, and then how to create that environment. And then we had, you know, in the mood book, I guess we set up a few distinct ideas that we want to try throughout, and have visual arcs for all that stuff. So there was something about at a certain point, which isn't as easily translated in the final film, but is all part of the process. We talked about the changing seasons as being something we wanted to reflect. So that actually inferred how I would light a little bit, you know, the angle and height and intensity of the light at different times of the year, and the set, you know, how you have the low winter sun, and the idea of everything getting darker and more enclosed. So all these things are just conversations. Don't know if that's in any way answering
fantastic.
stuff.
And as well, location of this house is like a modernist house. It's sort of like an amphitheater. So you have this like fantastic central living room in the house where all so much of the action is playing out. It's really fantastic. And in terms of like how were you and Justin first working together? Did you do a round of notes, or how was your?
Yeah. So basically, the first response was, my notes to the script as it was, and at that point we thought it was going to be set in America, so it was still, pertaining to that world. And then as things progressed, it was really to do with financing. Like I think we just realised that we could do this film better if we did it in the UK on a low budget than if we did it in America on a low budget. So then there was a conversation about translating it, which seemed a bit daunting at first, because it didn't take immediate translation. There wasn't a sort of a family and a setup that felt like the one in the American set one. But then it became a really interesting challenge. And we were feeding back and forth, so I would read the new drafts. I can't remember exactly how many drafts there were, maybe like 7 or something, but obviously not all massive redrafts. But there came a point where I kind of took over, and that had a lot to do with it coming to the UK and it being an obvious thing for me to sort of take over the writing, but also because I was very keen to take over. I loved working with Justin. I learned a massive amount about writing, working with somebody who was a writer and who can do plot and structure better than I can. But it got to a point where it was like, I just need to get my hands on this. And so I redrafted it. I cut a massive amount from it. It went from being a film that would have been over 2 hours to being something shorter. Big characters are missing. And what I wanted to do was just focus centrally on the women and the relationships at the core of it. And then it did go back to Justin, but not much changed. And then I suppose it got to the shooting script point, and at that point you change it again because you kind of streamline it. But also during that development period, I had started to look at cast. I knew Sienna would play Holly, so I was writing Holly knowing that Sienna would be her, and also, Holly became more Sienna. And aspects of the script changed because of locations. So the shooting script did change because of the house. Because even though the house was great, it was, one of 2 choices we had.
Really?
It was,
it
was really.
I felt like it's so pivotal.
No, I loved it. It's amazing. I definitely wanted it, but I was forced to have it. No, I wasn't. It was. It's tough because basically we were recceing during lockdown, and that was the only thing we did in person. Was we once went to London, and because all the film locations that would normally have their properties available for rent for films, everybody was really cagey because of COVID. So, and also it was quite a specific brief. To be fair, I wanted a very specific looking house.
There was hardly any choices. I mean, particularly because there's a hospital scene in it, and there's a dentist scene. And during 2020 lockdown, it was very hard to convince anybody to get you.
I think you would have had you. Of course not.
Just because of cleanliness and just everybody was feeling their way through it, and also or they wanted ridiculous amounts of money for it. So
for the insurance aspect of it, what happens if this place.
The modernist house and the banquet, it feels like it's almost like a set. It feels like made for the film.
When we saw the photos, we wanted to recce it. We knew it was great, but what it didn't have was, it didn't have a bedroom for Holly, and there was scenes in Holly's bedroom. So it meant we had to sort of, rewrite it around that. There was various other things about the literal geography of the house and its makeup that meant we had to change a lot of just basic stuff about how you block the scenes. And also we were really conscious that we needed to find a space that we wouldn't get bored in because the film is predominantly set there. And that house did offer that, it did. But I'm very happy with it. I really am. Don't get me wrong, I really am. But it was a difficult choice to make because you're making sacrifices in other ways to use that location.
But I guess that's where the prep comes in, because you have your ideal plan in prep, and you have all these concepts for the visuals and the design and all this stuff. So you know what you're after, and then when as low budget filmmakers, when you have to respond to what is available, then you can take that whole list of things and you can try and find ways to fit it with what's there. And also that's a really great part, is just responding to space and going, what are the positives here, and then like it's really great. It does feel like a stage. It feels like, especially the open living area, feels like something that is observing all these different layers and heights, which is something you were interested in very early on in discussing visuals. And it's just really, really nice ideas you had about blocking, like where the table is and how Holly sits with her back away from where her husband died, and that spot is now empty and there's a sort of gap in the room. It's all. I think it all works really well.
Once you've got it, like once you know that's where you're going to do it, then you just lean into it, and that's actually a joyful part, to find the creative solutions to problems. But that's just filmmaking anyway. Everything goes wrong all the time. So honestly, you're always troubleshooting, really.
Yeah, like we had the night in the woods.
Oh God! Which I actually slept through most of, to be fair.
So there's a big scene in the woods, and that's where we'd saved our sort of lighting budget so that we could have something a big set of lights on a cherry picker to illuminate the whole forest, really. And the generator went down.
And we had like fire trucks because there was going to be fake rain and everything.
Oh,
and I arrived on set and I'm like, why is there a fire engine here?
It was
the
big spend. It was the big spend, and then we lost all our power, and we only had 6 hours to shoot it.
And the guy that had loaned us the land turned out to be a very, very interesting character. And drove around drunk in his Land Rover all over this. It was hellish.
He's not watching this.
He's not a nice person.
But that is very stressful on no budgets, and we had to shoot that whole sequence in the woods in about an hour, because by the time we got the generator fixed, we were close to being at wrap time, and so the producers gave us another hour that they found the money for. But on such a low budget, that's all you get is another hour of overtime for the crew you have. So then you just have to go, okay, we just got to shoot this very quickly in six shots and tell that story.
So Jess, who plays Betsy...
Don't know why I'm talking about the nightmares, but they're part of independent filmmaking.
But it's also part of big filmmaking as well, things going wrong.
Yes, but they could pay for extra days.
That's true.
And a second generator.
Yeah.
But the troubleshooting and finding creative solutions to all the things that will go wrong, of course, because it just never goes to plan.
That was the hardest thing for me to learn as a young filmmaker, was you would develop a script and you would have these ideas and you'd have a strong vision for it, and because you lack confidence at that point, you just want to execute that blueprint, and then it doesn't happen that way for various reasons on the day, and it's like it really pulls the rug out from under you, and you learn that is literally just how it works. But you think, well, why am I putting so much effort into getting this way? But it's just so that you can throw it away, and that's why we do. We do shot lists, but we rarely follow them. Which is really painful for a lot of other people.
Yeah, because they see the shot list and they think, oh, these people are super prepared, and we're very, very prepared and organised, and know the script and know our visuals very, very well. And then at the same time, because of the background of just making it up as you go along, we're very happy to go, this is much cooler over here. Let's do it there.
Yeah, and it's always about what the actors do. So you've got an idea for the scene, you run a line read, you might tweak the script there because things don't sound right. Then you get it on its feet and you block it and you let the actors show you where it should happen. And so we'll often just watch them and go, okay, we'll do it that way.
Or you'll go, and this is just getting the practice with that, those time constraints and that budget sort of stuff is, we had to finish scenes on certain days. So we knew that, for example, we'd schedule the most complicated, usually the most emotionally complicated and most potentially difficult scenes early, so that if we ran over on that, we could, and then the scene where someone rings a doorbell or, makes a cup of tea, we could do it at the very end of the day, very quickly if we needed
someone
to.
else's finger if you need to.
Yeah. But that, it seems simple, but never start with the stuff that's easy at the start of the day, because you could just start luxuriating in it, and actually you need to get the really important stuff out of the way first. And if it goes over, that's okay, because from experience that there were certain scenes where we had 3 or 4 shots planned and we just did them in one because it worked as well.
So you've touched a little bit on how Holly's character evolved with Sienna in mind, but could you talk a little bit more about how you go about finding your talent and how you've worked with them, because obviously with dealing with like a lot of very heavy subject matter, quite apart from like all the genre elements, maybe you could talk a little bit about also the duty of care and like how your working relationship with the cast goes.
Yeah, well, this is the second time I think I've worked with a casting director, which is a real joy. I love that, and I mean, this I suppose was quite an unusual production because we did almost the whole thing online basically. So I met Sienna. She came to Edinburgh just prior to the first lockdown, and that was very special to be able to meet her because everybody else I just met online, and that was a real source of anxiety for me because I feel like, I don't know, I'm not a spiritual person or anything, but there's something about people's energy in a room. You just know if you like someone, if the way they move and all that, that's a big part of it, as well as whatever performance they give in their tapes. So I missed having that, but it worked out fine because we had amazing actors playing Jess and Jess playing Betsy and Isabel. And then Lindsay was just, kind of sent her a pleading letter, please do this, and she said yes. So that was great. But I mean, with the duty of care stuff, like, I don't know. I think we just talked a lot, so I don't really rehearse. I had Isabel and Ruby and Jess round to the flat when I was down in London. We just had 2 days of talking. We just talked about our experiences that related to the material, other experiences that you could, kind of find a route in that way. So, and I'm very honest and I'm very giving of myself, so I think that encourages people to do the same back. And so there was a trust built in that small space of time, and that's what I think rehearsals should be for. So with Sienna, it was just a lot of dialogue. Like we just, were on WhatsApp and messaging all the time and sharing stuff during that whole period of time, and just getting to know each other really. But when it comes to the shoot itself, it's like, I've said before, I really like working with actors that will go to extremes, but you can't always demand that of people. You just have to trust them to manage their own kind of boundaries. And Jess was amazing physically. She really threw herself at it, and I was really grateful for that. And Sienna too. I mean, I think that it was a weird time for everybody. She was separated from her family for the month that we were filming because of COVID, basically. They had to isolate. So she has 2 small kids, and she just lived isolated by herself for that month. So I think that probably did something to how she shaped Holly. But I guess I'm just thinking of the duty of care, because I'm thinking, I don't know if I really do look after them. It's more, I mean, that's definitely more of a producer thing, but do you mean because of the themes?
I mean, yeah, more of the themes, because dealing with very heavy, like, I guess I was really refreshed to see, as I mentioned to you, like a film which tackles eating disorders where you don't have gratuitous shots of like a very skinny woman, and which is sort of semi-sexualized, or and just dealing with that sort of like your representation of the themes that you have chosen to depict, I think, to me at least as an audience member, shows like a maturity and I think it's just like a different way into these sort of things.
Well, thanks. I think maybe the reason why I can't answer questions because it's just natural. It's a natural thing. These are themes that I'm familiar with and that I'm quite comfortable talking about. So it's always about doing the best and the most faithful thing to represent them and to kind of paint characters that aren't just a mental illness or who aren't just somebody with an eating disorder. And I mean, I think in preparing. I mean, the original script did have skinny Betsy.
Yeah, okay.
And I wasn't comfortable with that. I mean, I kind of did some research into the representation of eating disorders on screen just to sort of be, because I felt really responsible and I didn't want to fuck that up, basically. So I kind of knew not to depict any actual behaviours or any methods, basically, by which, people restrict. So that was kind of one decision, and so was never showing her to lose weight for sure. But also, the behaviour and the horror around the eating disorder for me is much more about the impact on the family than it is about, you know, Betsy's actual behaviour.
It's very clear in how these family dynamics between the three generations is really, they're tearing one another apart. And maybe could you talk a little bit more about how Sienna, sorry, I'm mixing up all the characters. So Jess and Sienna. How at the end their relation, were you working closer with those two for those final, in the final, without giving too much away for people who haven't seen it, but like that sort of approach to their relationship where they're really just in it together. And
I mean, they Sienna is naturally quite maternal with everybody, actually, so that was great to have on set. And just practically, Ruby was around less, but she was very, very protective of her as well. Jess and Sienna are really different kinds of performers. They've got, like, you know, you'll find that with all the actors you work with, but Sienna and I will have like 45-minute conversations about things, whereas Jess is like, yeah, okay, I know what you want, you know. And she could almost calibrate her performance. Like if it finished, we would have these weird moments where I would look at her and she would go, I know, and I'm like, I know, and then she would just do it differently, and it was the way I wanted it. So it was bizarre. She didn't over-intellectualize stuff. I don't think she really had a process. I think she's just very, very instinctive and very confident. And so she just kind of brought Betsy and showed us who Betsy was, and then was very consistent with it, which was interesting because she's not a trained actor in the same way that Ruby is, for example. So it was, they were close, and they took care of each other. They definitely looked after each other in those moments. And I think Jess was learning a lot from Sienna because of her experience on set.
I've got a couple of more questions before we open it up, but as we have a lot of emerging filmmakers in the room, I wonder, this is like a sort of, you've given us so many little nuggets of advice, but something you wish that you were told when you were starting out, for both of you.
It's really, I don't know, it's hard, basically. I mean, just, I don't know, you've just got to keep plugging, really, that's it, you know. And I think, like Dave, find the people that you like to collaborate with early on. I don't know advice-wise, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, really, I just enjoy it. I guess enjoying it is really important. But it is, but it's like sometimes you get so fixated on the end result that you don't actually, at least early on. Now I just enjoy every day. But I think to my younger self, I would have said, stop getting so stressed out about the end result or what people are going to think of it or where it's going to go or this sort of stuff, and just actually enjoy that day that you're making something more. Because the days I do that or did that were the best I felt. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's good advice or not, but yeah, it's important to remember, like, in the moment, be present and just have fun. The actual thing you're making, whether it's just with, you know, your phone and some friends, that's the thing that's fun. There's nothing more to it than that. The rest is just the circus that comes to town. Like, well, it is, the more money you get, it's just like the more people there is to go, you know, oh, have you got health and safety for this, or have you got this and that, or you got to sign this form, or you got to well, yeah, I mean, but filmmaking is just usually a small group of people who are friends, having fun and trying to say something and communicate ideas to other people.
And that's
the
what
rest of
short
it's
films
just circus.
are for, is making mistakes and trying things out and testing things and not making perfect. I mean, actually, I would say features are for that too. But, you know, it's still, you know, you're always learning, basically. And I mean, I suppose I would say, like, read more books about the psyche and human behaviour than you do about how to write scripts. You know, more fiction than, say, you know, how to direct a guerrilla film, that kind of stuff. That's rubbish, I think. I mean, you can take from everything, obviously, but for me, the minute I started just, as a writer, reading more about how our heads work, I think my writing improved. I save lots of images. That's really important. I think somebody told me once it's really important to know your taste, and that's a hard thing to quantify. But I think, like, if you save images on Instagram, and you go and you look at your saved folder, if you just scroll through that, you start to get a sense of, oh, that's me, that's what I like, and that's a useful thing. I wrote down earlier Shot Deck, because Dave introduced me to that last year, and it's an incredible resource for film stills. It's just got, like, you can use it like Google, so you can put in like films with close-ups on maggots, say, which is a search I do, and it'll bring up all the films with close-ups on maggots. And stuff.
Or
so
blue silhouette, aspect ratio 2:35, and it'll show you every film that is a blue silhouette and aspect ratio 2:35.
What's it called?
It's called Shot Deck, and it's a shame because for a long time it was a beta site and it was free, but it's just gone paid for. But it's worth doing. I've used it loads and started.
Certainly, if you're a director or DP, it was actually Lawrence Sher's the DP who created it, who shot the film Joker and some other films, and he sort of set it up just as his sort of a good way to quickly get his mood books together as a personal project, and then it's just kind of grown from there into a sort of really great reference for filmmakers.
So quickly, before I throw it out to questions, in terms of how you guys finding your style and how it's evolved over your working relationship so far.
Well, I mean, it is we kind of tend for all our projects to have one focal reference normally, like whether it's an image that is of a painting or of a photograph, something that's the touchstone. And I have that too when I'm writing, so that you can always come back and go, oh, that's the thing I wanted to write about, you know. But I think, you know, we like the same art, and it's always painting really that's kind of, I think the type of films we make are often quite dark, so, and often about the psychology or character psyches, and therefore the paintings of, like, you know, I suppose the Baroque era, Caravaggio, these kind of tableaus encased in darkness are, you know, we haven't made a really happy film, so I don't know what, like, it would be like to sort of look up referencing for that. But we always come back to these, and then I think, you know, you often riff on a lot of more like 3D art and stuff as well, and how you translate that. I don't know how, it's just evolved. I mean, it's just like, what I would say is that a lot of my mood books and Dave's mood books have images that we've used for years. They just keep coming back. Particularly the painter Ken Curry, and, you know, for me, the work of Von Trier, that kind of thing. Like, there's never a mood book without something Von Trier in it, you know what I mean? So it's, there's stuff that just gets recycled because we still love it, really.
And a lot of times visuals come from a pragmatic point of view as well. So I know, you know, Ruth talked about not rehearsing too much and allowing the actors to try out blocking. So a lot of the lighting comes from that idea of having the freedom to shoot 360 if possible.
Yeah.
So being as simple as possible and finding elegance in that simplicity to that style, you go, well, this is just going to fall into darkness because that's how it's set up. It's not, there's not too many lights on set. Stuff's kept offset as much as possible. The crews are small. It's chilled out. Nobody's shouting. You play music. This is all part of it, you know. Yeah. That's all part of how you get there.
What music are you playing?
Well, it depends.
Depends on the theme, but
I did have a playlist for a banquet. I didn't play as much music on this film as I normally do. I think because there was actual dialogue in it. So a lot of the films that I've made previously don't, and you can get away with that. But yeah, I made a playlist that was shared with the whole crew, and your camera department listened to it, and it was a mixture of stuff that Betsy might listen to, Holly might listen to, and then stuff that, you know, sets a tone for the room.
Really?
Oh yeah, and I WhatsApp the crew every day as well, so I'll send them images that are for today. Like, this is the kind of thing we're going for. This is the mood, and we just chat about it on the way to set. But the music's good. Like, the music's really good because especially if you're doing visual shots, it can set the rhythm of that image or what someone's doing with their hands, or, you know, just anything like that. It sort of, and it gets the actors in the mood, and it gets everybody focused in a different way because they know the tone and the sort of the rhythm of that scene.
Mm-hmm. This is a real masterclass. You're giving away all your, like, secrets and everything, but so to create that immersive world for cast and crew is, like, very exciting. Would anyone like to ask Dave or Ruth a question? Do we have a mic? Oh yeah, go for it.
Hi there. Yeah, it's working. Sorry. Do you think it's better when you're starting out to put your energies into being selected to make a funded shot, or just going out and making your own kind of no budget? Just because of also, if you get selected, you're going to get, I don't know if this is right to say, like, taken more seriously, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, if you go through a process, like a commissioning round process, it's also just about getting on radar, and it teaches you how to talk about your film, how to pitch your film, how to package your film. So these things are really important. So I would say both, really. You know, I think it is important at the start to sort of be recognised by the people that have the money and make the decisions, basically, definitely. But, you know, if you don't get, you know, selected for these things, not to be put off by that. Because, you know, I mean, after Paris Sexy, I went back to do a second round, basically to do another short film with Digicult. I can't remember who was all involved at the time, they change all the time, but it was Digicult, definitely. And I didn't get it the next time, you know. So that was then when we kind of just went off and did lots of our own stuff.
Yeah. I guess don't rely on it as your seal of approval. Like, and I personally think just making stuff as much as you can is the best way to learn and get better. It was the same with this film. It's like, you know, yeah, it's just like you just learn so much by making something really quickly like that. It just it teaches you a lot, and I feel like with all the first feature film directors I work with, it's
This film was refused financing from all the so we had financing, private financing, and it was 500,000 basically. It was very little. And they said, you can totally seek more money, but you have to make it for that. And that's what we agreed to, was like, if we couldn't get more money, and we went to Film 4, went to BBC, went to Creative Scotland, all said no. You know, so it's...
They were all in the audience over the weekend, though, like, to see what they'd missed.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's reasoning for that. You know, it wasn't a film shot in Scotland. Bureaucracy. But it wasn't like resoundingly supported in that way, and you know, not everything has to be supported by Creative Scotland in Scotland, you know.
I think that thank you so much for the question, and it's a really good point, because you have presumably in the UK as well, and this is the question of things being overdeveloped, and like there are certain funding bodies that you go to and you're sort of essentially like at the mercy of, and then a banquet has come in like totally left field, as you say, and you've had this opportunity to make it, and that's your first feature, and it's fantastic, and now you can, well, a question for later, but on to the next as well, so it's really, really exciting. Thank you. Anyone else? We had some questions over. Do you want to wait for the mic?
No, pressure's on. So going back to the beginning where you were talking when you first, like, you were putting a crew together for like your first funded short.
Yeah.
Just how do you make those friends? How do you like approach people and like, hey, I need people for my crew, without sounding too like, hey, I need people for my crew,
and also for free. No,
yeah, also for free.
Well, I'm trying to think back now. I mean, I think that you've got to have the best thing you can have is a really great script. You know, a really, really great script, because people want to do them. People want to make good films. And so people will, you know, collaborate with people on projects they think are meaningful and worthwhile and exciting and fresh. And particularly, like, you know, like your individual heads of department. Like if it's a short film, say, that's got really exciting design opportunities, then it's, you know, a great place for a designer to work. I think, you know, when you approach people, just be a fan, you know, so kind of know what people don't want is to feel like, I need a sound recordist. Well, you do it because you do sound. You know, it's more like you've got to sort of get to know that person's work, and, you know, I guess maybe work out what their references are. You know, you want to entice people to do it. But But it is just, unfortunately, it is just something that is sort of an accumulative process. Like, you just have to kind of, because it's really difficult to think back now, because I'm really lucky with A Banquet. Like, the step from making the shorts to features there wasn't daunting at all, because I was taking all my pals with me. So like all the heads of department were people I'd worked with, well, not all, but nearly all were people I'd worked with before. And it just meant that, you know, all of that was far less daunting. But just get to know the work of people who, you know, I suppose people who've been making work with Short Circuit recently, and then maybe, you know, before that, what other short films are coming out of Scotland. I always say to look at like the nominated shorts for Scottish BAFTAs and, you know, BIFAs, all these kind of things, just to get a sense of people who are just emerging and who have experience but aren't like wanting basically loads of money. But yeah, I think.
Yeah, and I think I'm very shy. A lot of people are quite shy as well. So I think when I was starting out, I wish more people had approached me and talked to me, because I find it very difficult to approach people myself. So I think extending that initial thing in a very friendly way goes a long way, and suddenly it becomes less awkward very, very quickly. But that initial conversation or that initial compliment can be quite hard. But I really loved it when people said, oh, they'd seen this and wanted to have a meeting and stuff. I was really up for all of that straight away. I think most people are, but a lot of people are just shy and nervous, and it's not a natural thing to try to sort of be the person in the room saying, hey, want to do this with me? It's just, yeah, I think so.
And just being really passionate about your project as well, that's infectious.
I feel like scandalous that we haven't actually talked about the HIDs, the like outrageously good production design, the sound design, like the styling, everything about A Banquet. Could you talk maybe a little bit about working with those HIDs?
Yeah, well, so the production designer is an unusual one actually, because I had not worked with this production designer before, and we struggled to secure one in the lead up. So, and that's like a really big part of that early process for me is how Dave and I communicate with that person. It's really crucial to be, you call it a trifecta. And it's because it's just so interlinked what we're doing with what we're doing within the frame. So Sophia Stockel was the production designer. I hadn't worked with her before, and it came together really fast. And I was really nervous about that, because the production designer I've worked with previously, I built a bit like Dave, not as long, but a relationship whereby she knew my taste. So the designer of Be Still My Beating Heart. But Sophia was amazing, and she did incredible things with an astonishingly small budget, you know. So that was a beautiful new relationship. But
and she leaned into the minimalist aesthetic,
yeah,
which I think works really well. And then you also had conversations about those moments of aggression,
yeah,
moments of violence with
this controlled space.
Within this controlled space, with the furnishing stuff just out of kilter, and the sort of just in the periphery of the frame, the feng shui of the sort of the vibes sort of just suddenly change throughout. So you're not totally aware of it, but there's just these things that are spoiled or ruined in the corners, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah,
ideas.
She's smart, very smart. And she's just gone on to do Peter Strickland's new film, which is really cool. But then the heads of wardrobe was a Glasgow-based unit called I'll Be Your Mirror, which is Kirsty Halliday and Stuart Truesdale. And I always wanted to work with them, but they were originally sort of fashion stylists. So I brought them in on our short film, Be Still My Beating Heart. And now they're just like working solidly. They're phenomenal. Kirsty's exceptionally talented. And Kat is from Scotland as well, makeup artist. Was introduced to her on Be Still. And then I'm trying to think of others. Like the composer was somebody I worked with previously. Right. He's a great friend. Yeah, it was a pleasure to be able to sort of, as you say, make those calls. And well, as I said as well, he doesn't have a choice. But to be able to make those calls and say, we're going to do this, are you on board? And everybody was. So yeah, it was a lovely shoot.
Yeah, and both Kat and Kirsty I work with quite a lot in Scotland anyway. I've done quite a lot with Kat for Rachel McLean, who's a visual artist, and that's usually a very small crew as well, of 4 or 5 people, and we just when something's that small, I actually prefer it to the bigger crews, because you have a chance to make yourself a little family. So yeah, it just makes everything easier that way.
And that transition from short to first feature, if you're coming up with your family and everyone's moving up, I guess it makes, like, as you say, a really positive experience. Like, you feel really safe with your family, which is fantastic.
And some people tried to make it more professional by saying, like they'll say, sound, do this, and you're like, that's Robert, just call him by his name. It's like, you don't, stop calling people by their department, it's just weird. That's Cat.
Who was that, the first
Cat,
AD?
come over here. Yeah.
And the first AD, was that someone that you had worked with before?
It's not, no. It was a tough job for the first AD because we were one of the first productions to shoot coming out of lockdown. We didn't have insurance, so, and this person...
What was... Because you were originally meant to shoot in May, and it got pushed to...
July, August?
Yeah, we shot in June, July.
July. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
And it was that...
No
the person
insurance.
had to... No.
It didn't really exist at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
In the middle of 2020. At least there was, I think, the big fund from the government to ensure film productions happened during our production. But there was no lateral flows, there was no tests available to just regular jobs. I think there was some of that stuff was saved for hospitals. But in terms of that, it was just hand hygiene, temperature check, wear the mask, and hope for the best.
And nobody did get it. You know, we were very, very lucky. And I think because for most people it was their first job coming back after being out of work for like at least 6 months, everybody was just really careful about preserving the safety on set, and you know, just because we couldn't make demands like bigger budgeted projects could, so like to pay people to quarantine, to pay people to test regularly. So it was just kind of saying, can you just be careful on the weekend kind of thing. And
did you have a COVID uplift, or it was just like as usual, no extra, like other than the PPE stuff you were wearing? It was just like business as usual.
Yeah, and somebody with a sort of like a pole, sort of keeping it basically telling us to stand apart. And
yeah, I mean, it's slow. Well, we did follow a lot of the protocols at the time, which were the idea of not having too many people in the same room at the one time, and so make sure a room didn't get crowded. So it would be things like, okay, art department can set up first, and then we can move in with the cameras, and then they can step out, and then the actors can come in, and all this sort of that does slow you down a little bit. All that sort of back and forth of things like that.
Were there any rewrites due to COVID, or it was just...
They tried to make me rewrite bits. It was funny, there was a bit where two of them snog, and they were really like, can they please not snog? And I'm like, no, they have to snog. They have to snog. So they did get extra testing around that. There was a lot of extra special care around that. And then we cut it. So it was completely pointless. But there's a lot of...
That was tricky to navigate, because actually any scene that involved physical contact and was treated like it was an intimacy scene or a sex scene or something because of the COVID thing, and there was it made it quite difficult.
Spitting and stuff in it. You know, I remember one day.
But to try and cut around it is not a natural way of how we'd shoot something. We just let people do what they want to do, and then find the right shot in that, rather than saying it's got to be a shot of spit here.
You remember the day I was brought in early to show them where somebody would cough, and I went, there. And they were trying to mitigate for this. It was very bizarre. It was just like, he's going to act and cough there, I don't know. And, you know, it was very, very strange. But the coughing was really, everybody was very paranoid about that.
Do we have any other questions? At the back there, do we have a mic?
In terms of like visuals and scripts, would you say that do you look for inspiration, or do you have ideas and then kind of look at the art and things that you like to try and visualize that while you're writing a script?
Bit of both. I mean, I'm a real hoarder of images, so like Dave has tried to get me to use Pinterest, but I don't possess it. I have to possess it on my laptop, so I'll use Pinterest and steal it. So like I've got a big bank of images that I'll go to when I want to, I suppose, spark inspiration. But usually it's just kind of going down a bit of a hole. You know what I mean? That you start with something and then, you know, kind of riff on that, and maybe return to artists and photographers that you like. But you know, it could also just be focusing on, say you've got one character and you start to think about that one character and what they could represent, what clothes they might wear, and you know, you just start to build a picture of like the colours that you associate with them and textures and things. Honestly, it's my favourite part. I love putting together mood books and lookbooks and we do various formations of it as the production goes on. So I might do one that kind of represents the film and the narrative at the beginning to entice heads of department and cast and everything. But as we move forward, Dave and I will have a much more, Dave will do a much more specific cinematography book that reflects the arcs that we're talking about, as well as, you know, framing and tonal qualities of stuff. And then I'll maybe do something very, very unique for the costume, and they'll probably send one in return. And it's so sharing images like that is really, really important, and I really, really encourage everybody to just, like, particularly with Instagram, I think that's a great tool. Not for like other people's avocado on toast or whatever, but like, you know, when you get the feed where it shows you things you might like, it's always showing me things I like, and I love that algorithm, you know. So it's really, it's I definitely say get into that.
And when you're writing, you're a very visual writer as well, and very temporal writer, so there's a sense of the pace of the scene and how many shots it is and how important those shots are is all in how you write and the prose you use. And there's something, in a very good way, it's very economical but also very literary how you write, so you get a sense of the interiors of the characters much more than the standard scripts you read, I think, as well.
Thanks.
Do we have any other questions? Right at the back there.
Hi guys, thanks so much for this. I'd love to know how much you rewrote in the edit.
Great
question. Sure. Not a lot, actually. There are moments of scenes that are missing, like this, like for example the snog, that's gone. But there's
that you
no.
Fought for.
I know. But then it just became really weird. It was like too much pressure on them snogging in the end, and that's what was weird, you know. So yes, that's gone. There isn't a whole scene that we've taken out. The scenes pretty much reflect the shooting script, except that what we did was there's a section where at the beginning where Betsy goes to a party and has an experience in the woods, and in the shooting script, you saw what happened. You went through the experience with her, and then we decided to transplant that, basically. So we kind of took that moment away from there, and in the edit put it towards the end and almost revealed what had happened. But we did it to chime with Holly's experience at the time. So I don't know if basically Betsy looks at the moon, stuff happens. Later on, her mum looks at the moon, and that's where we explain what happened to Betsy early on. But otherwise, it's actually quite closely reflects the shooting script.
Go for it.
Hi there, thanks so much guys. I have a question for Ruth. You talked a lot earlier about your interest in psychology and how that influenced your writing. I would guess my question's about, did you feel an internal psychological process when it came to taking on your first feature? Because you talked about the hunger of it, but I feel as a female filmmaker as well, there's this kind of, sometimes, I don't know, it's kind of a self-limiting inner voice. So it feels quite psychological to take that risk.
I don't think I can do anything. Honestly, I don't. I mean, I kind of on some level know I can, but I don't. I go at everything thinking I'm not like good enough to do it, or that I'm not going to be able to do it. So that's just how I roll in general.
I'm the same.
Everybody is scared. That's the thing. The key thing to know. Everybody on set is scared. Everybody. Some more than others, maybe. But I don't know. I think this is the first time that I have been on a set and kind of looked around and gone, I think I do know what I'm doing. Like, maybe I'm all right at this. And that's the first time, really, because most of it, I'm just bricking it, if I'm honest. But the thing is once you get there, it all moves so fast that by the end of the day rattles by, basically, when you're on set. Unless, of course, the generator breaks. But then you can sleep. What I would say is like what's helped me as I've kind of made more and more films is just to be honest about when I don't know things, basically. So, you know, when I first started out, I remember it was like the director has to know everything, they need to know everything, you're the key, and it's like, and you don't, you absolutely don't. So I'll just say, like, if somebody asks me something and I don't know the answer, I'll be honest and say I'll have a think about it, you know, or what do you think? You come up with the idea. So this is a collaborative process, guys. But yeah, I know what you're saying, but once the wheels are in motion, you just have to, go with it. You just have to go with it and not overthink it too much. You're welcome.
So this will probably be the final question, if that's okay, guys. So make it a good one. Did you have who? Oh.
Obviously, the film you made is dealing with quite heavy topics psychologically as well. Like, what kind of precautions do you do within your research and stuff like that to make sure that it's not becoming so triggering towards, like, or is that just really
None.
difficult?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I want to trigger you a little bit. I don't know. I mean, I'm a person with a mood disorder. I have anxiety and depression. It's something that I've, had for a long time. And so it's a big part of how I make work. It's a big part of how I access the kinds of stories I want to tell. I think I'm just nice, like when it comes to the cast members and stuff, playing the heavy duty stuff, I think we're just kind to each other, I think it's just about being a kind person, a nice person, and really honest as well. But it's that sort of stuff can be really limiting as a filmmaker if you're worried about, how people are gonna find a way to make it politically incorrect, you know what I mean, all the time. And there was aspects of that I was worried about with this, but is that typing what we're saying? Sorry. There's a record of this.
Machine learning.
So yeah, I don't know if that answers it, but I didn't do that much anti-triggering research, no.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
And to finish up, can you maybe tell us a little bit about what you're going to be up to next?
Yeah, it's not like it's a secret. People do that, like you're allowed to say,
Really?
Because it might not happen. No, it's quite nice because the film I was talking about earlier, the first feature that I was hoping to make, is what I'm writing now. That's in development with Creative Scotland. So I'm writing that at a fucking snail's pace at the moment. And taking procrastination to like Olympic levels. But it's happening slowly. And then I'm attached to direct a couple of other films that other people are writing. Okay. So they move faster. And and that's it. So there's a few kind of features in the mix for me. What about you?
In the immediate future, my wife is also a DP, so she's I've just finished a long project for the National Theatre of Scotland. She's about to start a TV drama, a 3-part TV drama that she's going to shoot. So I'm just going to be chilling out doing commercials, small jobs, and looking after our 4-year-old son. That's where I'm at for the next wee while.
Thank you both so much. So
Thank
Ruth
you.
Paxton, David Liddell, thank you. A banquet, you can see it's fantastic, so let's give it up for them. Thank you. We finished on time.
Did we? Ooh, good.
Yeah, I had like people like waving.
I know, I can see people hovering.